Welcome, everybody. This is All Minus One Story Time with your favorite host, Bill. We are here on this segment, Story Time, reading great stories, great works of fiction and nonfiction by important folks. And today being a Monday, that is March 22nd, 2021, we will be reading from Klaus Schwab and his book, COVID-19 and the Great Reset. So we will pick up where we left off, of course. Now, one thing I do want to say is I've been trying to keep these 20, 30 minutes long. Last week, I went an hour because the one section was very brief, and then I continued to read. And I do want to get these out, but my Mondays are very busy right now, especially given that my wife is about to have a baby in 12 weeks, and we have birthing classes basically up until the week of delivery. And that is a process that takes up a large portion of my evening. So in any case, folks, with all that said, this may be short today, and I'm going to have to watch the time. It's just how it goes. So let's get into it. So we're at 1.2.2.2, employment. For some reason, Schwab likes to, instead of having different chapters, he likes to have all these little sub-chapters and headings. In any case, it says the pandemic is confronting the economy with a labor market crisis of gigantic proportions. The devastation is such and so sudden as to leave even the most seasoned policymakers almost speechless, and we're still nigh on policy lists. In testimony before the U.S. Senate Committee on Banking on 19th of May, the Federal Reserve System Chairman Jeremy J. Powell confessed this precipitous drop in economic activity has caused a level of pain that is hard to capture in words, as lives are upended amid great uncertainty about the future. In just the 2 months of March and April 2020, more than 36 million Americans lost their jobs, reserving 10 years of job gains. Now, before I go further, and I talk about this every single time, Klaus Schwab likes to pretend that this is a natural, organic occurrence of the virus. This is not. This is government authoritarianism. And the Federal Reserve chair saying, oh, this has been so terrible, blah, 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 we have this and that, and the businesses are down, again, is not talking about what is organically happening. It's talking about what is centrally planned. If you don't like your lives being planned by bureaucrats who have nothing to do with it, then perhaps you should stop voting for leftist type policies. Klaus Schwab is a leftist. He likes authoritarian government. He likes these lockdowns. He's trying to act like that they're a natural extension of people not being able to go to work. They're not. People aren't able to go to work because the government said, and frankly, the government violated its own guaranteed rights, at least in the American context, both federally and on the state level. Most governments did, at least. Few state governments did differently. And we are seeing the difference in those between the Democrat-run governments versus the ones that are run by Republicans and those who are rhinos, Republicans in name only. And we can see the ones that are more strict toward the Constitution and following the rule of law have better economies. They have better outputs, and they have less suffering within their states. But when you want everyone to be a slave and on welfare and constantly feeding into your system and you to have control of them, you don't want them to have power, and you don't want them to be free, and you must control them. In any case, all that's an aside. That's basically what's going on here, right? It's not what Schwab is trying to say. In the U.S., like elsewhere, temporary dismissals caused by the initial lockdowns may become permanent, inflicting intense social pain that only robust social safety nets can alleviate, and profound structural damage on countries' economies. Robust social safety nets can alleviate. There would be no need for the safety net if you didn't cause the problem in the first place. This is like the Hegelian dialectic. The problem is the virus. There was no reaction to be had or solution to be had, but the government creates a reaction, which then creates another problem. And then they come in with the solution they desire to have. The level of global unemployment will ultimately depend on the depth of the collapse in economic activity, but hovering around or exceeding two-digit levels across the world are a given. No, only because you forced the lockdowns. That's it. Only because you decided. In the U.S., a harbinger of difficulties has come elsewhere. It is estimated that the official rate of unemployment could reach 25% in 2020, a level equivalent to that of the Great Depression. That would be even higher if hidden unemployment were to be taken into account, like workers who are not counted in official statistics because they are so discouraged they abandon the workforce and cease looking for jobs or part-time work, who are looking for full-time jobs. So someone like me who basically is like, I'm going to do my own thing. That's what they're talking about. However, I'm not doing that because of the virus. I'm doing that because of governmental policies. Otherwise, I would just finish my schooling, which I should be applying for right now, but I'm not going to because I don't know what the governments are going to do, especially in my state with Governor Jim Justice, who is essentially a rhino. The situation of employment in the service industry may be particularly dire. That of workers not officially employed will be even worse. The service industry, they're talking about restaurant services. And again, completely made up. Everything here. As far as the need to shut down the businesses, to slow the spread, and whatever else, we've known what the data is. Most people, they'll get sick. We don't do this for other viruses, for flus, for whatever you could say. But Bill, the death rate is 0.01% or whatever it is, right? Yeah, it's higher than the flu. I get it. It's also not counted appropriately, and the flu is gone this year, guys. By the way, flu deaths just don't exist anymore. Pneumonia deaths don't exist anymore. Any kind of deaths, we all know this. We've been talking about it for a year. Come on. As for GDP growth, the magnitude and severity of the unemployment situation are country dependent. Each nation will be affected differently depending on the economic structure and the nature of its social contract. But the U.S. and Europe offer two radically different models of how the issue is being addressed by policymakers and what lies ahead. Well, I didn't mean to do that. 1 second here. Sorry about that, guys. As of June 2020, the rise of the U.S. unemployment rate, it stood at a mere 3.5 prior to the pandemic. That's right. When you get out of centralized planning, I'm not saying Trump's administration was not involved with that because that's business as usual, but when you do a lot less of it, unemployment rates tend to go down. It seems to be a thing. Was much higher than anywhere else. In April 2020, the U.S. unemployment rate had risen by 11.2 percentage points compared to February. Well, I wonder why. When all the governors and most of the federal government is saying we must shut down, this was not a natural process. The end. This was not something that anyone had to do, by the way, either. Like, businesses could be left to their own devices to decide what they wanted to do. They could say, hey, employees, come in if you wish. We won't fire you. Your job will be here, but we're going to try to remain open. And just realize that if we shut down, because I'm a small business owner, I need to pay my bills too. We shut down, your job may not be here and you're going to be searching for a job anyways. See, that's reality, right? That's how we deal with things. The left says, well, we can have a social safety net. Okay. Well, maybe, but the correction that reality brings is what is necessary. And so you guys decided beforehand you were going to operate outside of reality and therefore never let reality actually hit. And now the social safety net needs to be brought in. Why? Because of your own doing? No, in no way, shape, or form. By the way, folks, I just don't think that if businesses were left to their own devices that they would have shut down at all. You would have people scared and panicked, some people, but for the most part, this would have been no different than any other year that we've had a major flu, when we had swine flu a few years ago, or the bird flu. Would not have mattered. H1N1 was a big deal, supposedly, and people still went about their business as usual. So it says, well, during the same period in Germany, it had increased by less than 1 percentage point. So U.S. unemployment rate had risen to 11.2 percentage points compared to February, while in Germany it increased by less than 1 percentage point. But you're not giving us the data about the German rate. What is the difference in that increased rate? And two, yeah, I know Germany did shut down, but it did things differently. So you're not comparing policy exactly the same way. Are you not? Are you using some sort of false equivalency here? Yes. Yes, you are, Klaus. Two reasons account for this striking difference. The U.S. labor market has a hire and fire culture that doesn't exist and is often prohibited by law in Europe, which just that means that you are all about mediocrity, that you basically like to hire people and they could be the biggest dunce. Doesn't matter how good they are, they get to stay in their job. Sounds like you like weak societies, Klaus. That's why you like to rule by an iron fist. Right from the onset of the crisis, Europe put into place fiscal measures destined to support unemployment. Not possible. You're just going to run up your deficits. In the U.S., government support so far, June 2020, has been larger than in Europe, but of the fundamental different nature. It provides income support for those who lost their jobs, with the occasional result that those displaced are better off than in full-time jobs before the crisis. In Europe, by contrast, the governments decided to directly support those businesses that kept workers formerly employed in their original jobs, even when they were no longer working full-time or not working at all. Again, centralized planning and authority, not ideal in any way, shape, or form. It basically says, here is a paycheck for you to be incompetence. Here is a paycheck to do nothing. Here is a paycheck to screw around, never have to improve yourself, never allow reality to make its corrections. This is why I tell you, and will continue to state, that leftism is hedonism. It is libertine. It is not liberal. It's not about freedom. True freedom comes with discipline. True freedom comes with service. True freedom comes with planning. The rest of that is just libertine, hedonistic hell. And you are a slave. In Germany, the short time working scheme, a modern emulated elsewhere, replaces up to 60% of earnings for 10 million employees who would have otherwise lost their jobs. While in France, a similar scheme also compensated a similar number of workers by providing them up to 80% in their previous salary. The United States has the same thing with FMLA. Many other European countries came up with similar solutions, without which layoffs and redundancies would have been much more consequential. These labor market supporting measures are accompanied by other governmental emergency measures, like those giving insolvent companies the possibility to buy time. What he just said here is I do not like reality, therefore we are going to manipulate it with our modern manipulation skills and pretend like we are not trying to change reality. Because I am telling you right now, Klaus brought up in the beginning of this book or pamphlet that he was concerned about the second, third, fourth, and fifth order consequences and so forth. Well, what he is doing by centralized planning is creating big second, third, fourth, and so forth consequences. They're going to be bigger. They're going to be huge. When you correct these things, it puts everyone at a greater risk and deficit. Maybe not initially, but in the future. You are literally weakening your society by doing so fiscally. In many European countries, if firms can prove that their liquidity problems are caused by the pandemic, they won't have to file for bankruptcy until later, possibly as late as 2021 in some countries. The U.S. had some issues with that, right? They getting rid of, let's say, payments to landlords and whatever else, or payments to whomever you may be renting from. in some businesses getting bailouts. There was unemployment, whatever else. But if you didn't work within a certain period of time, or you didn't have the appropriate paperwork, or you couldn't just get through because there was only so much money allotted, you didn't get it. And I saw a lot of people complaining about this. Same people who are scared to death of this virus too. You are some weak, weak people. Complaining about this virus and the government being your daddy to bail you out, you are literally emotionally and mentally a child. I don't know why we allow these people to vote, honestly. Not in our system. Other systems, socialistic systems, fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, we live in a socialistic system, folks. We really do. Look at how things actually operate. But that's aside from the point. My point being is where we should be, what we should be following. The ideal of Americanism should be that we are a strong, independent, robust people who make our way and who help out our neighbors. And yet all we do is infantilize ourselves over and over again. And this is the way of the world. It's the world wants you to have no responsibility, have no leadership, have no nothing, and only those who are elite, only they can decide for you, like Mr. Schwab himself. This makes eminent sense if the recovery takes hold, but it could be that this policy only postpones the problem. Of course it does. Globally, a full recovery of the labor market could take decades, and in Europe, like elsewhere, the fear of mass bankruptcies following the mass unemployment looms large. This is just absurd. Why would it take decades? We got out of the crash of 2008 almost immediately once President Trump was elected. It wasn't like that before. Why? Because of government policy. Now, someone out there might say, well, Bill, that's just not true. Okay, well, we can get into that conversation another time, but you're wrong. You're wrong. It was the policies of the Obama administration and the government, of the federal government at the time, running big business bailouts, Wall Street bailouts, Federal Reserve policies, giving money to foreign agencies, and putting huge restrictions that kept us in high unemployment. Magically, all of a sudden, Trump deregulates and business is good. Gas prices went down. They're up now. Part of that's because of the Keystone Pipeline, but, part of that's probably because of bombs in Syria as well. Those things tend to happen, tend to fall in line like that. In the coming months, the unemployment situation is bound to deteriorate further for the simple reason that it cannot improve significantly until a sustainable economic recovery begins. This won't happen before a vaccine or a treatment is found. Absolutely untrue. Won't happen because you won't allow it to happen. Seems to be the case now, even though not everyone's getting the vaccine. Meaning that many people will be doubly worried about losing their job and about not finding another one if they do lose it, which will lead to a sharp increase in savings rates. Why would it lead to people saving if they're just barely getting by? See, it's not the people who are high up that lose their jobs, by the way, folks. It's the people that are low down, like he said earlier, the service industries. Someone was making, I can't recall who it was. Maybe it was Schwab himself, but it was something I read. I read either here or over on the live show, The Ends Justify the Memes. I read someone talking about this and how that it would affect the essential workers. And my first thought was, well, if they're essential workers, they never stopped working. Oh, I know what it was. It was if we got rid of the lockdowns and if we did this and that, it'll affect the essential workers because they won't be able to work. And I'm thinking, what retard logic do you have? They've been working this whole time through a pandemic. Obviously, if the employees of Walmart can go to Walmart every single day with thousands of people walking through Walmart, tens of thousands, probably daily, right? Then why can't anyone else work in a smaller office environment that is highly less tracked? In a slightly more distant time, from a few months to a few years, two categories of people will face a particularly bleak employment situation. Young people entering for the first time a job market devastated by the pandemic and workers susceptible to be replaced by robots. Oh, yeah, but you want to raise the minimum wage to keep those younger people out, and you want to bring in migrant workers, which also keeps the younger people out, but also displaces those people that would be displaced by jobs who would be done by automation, right? Pretty sure Schwab is a all-inclusive, harmonious, intersectionalist. Pretty sure from stuff I've seen that he says and his organization says. These are fundamental issues at the intersection of economic, society, and technology with defining implications for the future of work. Automation, in particular, will be a source of acute concern. The economic case that technology always exerts a positive economic effect on the long term is well known. The substance of the argument goes like this. Automation is disruptive, but it improves productivity and increases wealth, which in turn leads to greater demand for goods and services and thus to new types of jobs and satisfy those demands. This is correct, but what happens between now and the long term? Okay. The argument on its face value is correct. Like, unless you're a Luddite and you don't want technology. If that's the case, folks, then you might as well hire as many people as possible to carry things on their back across the country instead of driving it in a truck. It's absurd, of course, to do such a thing, but that is the basic logic of a Luddite. You could employ more people because we'd have to carry more stuff across the nation. It's also a lot slower and doesn't allow for the population growth and technological boom that we have, right? You have to destroy all that stuff, and then people are cut off, and they have to start working in local communities again. The people on the left kind of like that. I like that, but not when it's imposed upon me. The reality is, though, is that, automation does, or technology does make life easier. But there will be other jobs available, and there always has to be people to oversee the technology, at least for quite a long while. How will we adjust? Well, we shall adjust just like any other random new job that was created in the last several hundred years over time. People will start doing that job. It will take a few years for it to pick up. Some people will be specialists in it immediately, and it will slowly phase in and integrate into the market as always. And there is no need to centrally control that. It will happen organically. I mean, my Lord, guys, we have 4,000 years of, literally 4,000 years of economic history. Like, we know how this stuff works. In all likelihood, the recession induced by the pandemic will trigger a sharp increase in labor situation, meaning that the physical labor will be replaced by robots and intelligent machines, which will in turn provoke lasting and structural changes in the labor market. In the technology chapter, we analyze in more detail the impact that the pandemic is having on automation, but there is already ample evidence that it is accelerating the pace of transformation. The call centra spectre epitomizes this situation. Okay. And I'm assuming that is the end of this chapter. Nope. How much further do we have? Not much. Looks 2 pages. In the pre-pandemic era, new artificial intelligence-based technologies were being gradually introduced to automate some of the tasks performed by human employees. The COOF and its accompanying measures of social distancing, not the COOF, not even the social distancing, has suddenly accelerated this process of innovation and technological change. No. Centralized authority using a virus as an excuse has accelerated this process. Chatbots, which often use the same voice recognition technology behind Amazon's Alexa and other software that can replace tasks normally performed by human employees, are being rapidly introduced. Yeah, it's terrible. I hate this. I'd rather talk to. Sometimes I want to talk to a robot, and sometimes I want to talk to a person, but I want the option. These innovations, provoked by necessities, sanitary measures, will soon result in hundreds of thousands and potential millions of job losses. I'll tell you actually when I would rather talk to a human being than a robot. When it is small, when it is hospitable, and when it is a local thing with high quality. If you go to a local restaurant and you see the pride that people take, and I mean, it might be a fast food place, but a locally, privately owned fast food joint of their own styling, you'll see how well people take care of the place. Look at Chick-fil-A. That's a big chain, right? And how the employees are trained. That is so few and far between elsewhere in the world because everyone else is about that bottom line and the automation, whatever. And what does Chick-fil-A do? It makes its employees work. Notice how Chick-fil-A also, as much flack as they get, is committed to hiring young employees and give them job experience. You'll notice if you go to a Chick-fil-A that it's usually full of young men and women. Why is that? Well, again, that has to do with their leadership. And what Schwab is talking about here is a complete lack of leadership. It's a complete lack of foresight. And it's a complete lack of understanding of any of this stuff. Again, unless he's just trying to give you some sort of dribble of his own concoction to convince you that he's correct. And the vagaries and the holes in his arguments are so huge. It's just glaring to me. But in any case, again, he's saying that these innovations are by necessity, like the sanitation. I don't know why. I was saying about this with my wife this weekend. Like the coof dies in ultraviolet light, which means basically if you're outside, guys, it's destroyed immediately. The same with, at least on a sunny day, the same with it being exposed to oxygen. In an air droplet, or sorry, not an air droplet, a water droplet, a molecule, like if you sneeze, where it gets atomized, or if you cough or something like that, or if you accidentally spit as you're speaking, it's encased in water there. There's no oxygen getting to it. It can survive for a little bit. But once it's exposed to oxygen, it pretty much dies right away. AIDS, or HIV, that is similar. A lot of viruses are like this, very weak when exposed to oxygen. Yet we are going through these levels of decontamination that are insane right now. Insane. And trust me, guys, I worked in a jail for 13 years. Dirty places that you have to sanitize at certain times. I mean, we're talking about sewage floods, all kinds of stuff that happen in jails. What we're doing now is a joke. It's absolutely a joke to all of the coof things, all of it. And Schwab's explanations is a joke as well. It says, as consumers may prefer automated services to face-to-face interactions for some time to come, what is currently happening with call centers will inevitably occur in other sectors as well. Automation anxiety is therefore set for revival. That thing that's been going on in call centers has been going on for over 20 years, Klaus, so I don't know why that's... I don't even know what your point is. Which the economic recession will exacerbate. The only way we're going through a recession is because you and your buddies created it. As usual. It's usually the fact. The last one we had was created as well, folks. The 2008 financial crisis, as it's called now. Absolutely 1,000% manufactured. By the government. By the government and Wall Street. Pretty funny how that works. The process of automation is never linear. It tends to happen in waves and often in harsh economic times. When the decline in companies' revenues make labor costs relatively more expensive, this is when employers replace less skilled workers with automation to increase labor productivity. Again, not necessarily true. It depends on the cost. There is a weight that one must give to buying a machine, the maintenance of the machine, versus an employee. Also, it depends on your style of business and leadership. Very important. For me, I'd much rather generally have good employees, and I would fire an employee in a heartbeat if he did not do well. It says low-income workers in routine jobs, manufacturing and services like food and transportation, Are those most likely to be affected? Actually, no, not food or transportation or manufacturing. Food in a restaurant, sure. The rest of them, no. Distribution, manufacturing, no, not at all. Transportation, no, not at all. None of those things shut down. Those were all essential workers. This guy's writing this in June or publishing it in June. He's supposed to be the expert. I mean, other than looking like Blofeld and dressing like the Emperor from The Empire Strikes Back or whatever, I don't really understand what this guy is all about, other than, like I said, looking like a Bond villain or something. The labor market will become increasingly polarized between high-paid work and lots of jobs that have disappeared or aren't well paid and are not very interesting. In emerging and developing countries, particularly those with a youth bulge, technology runs the risk of transforming the demographic dividend into a demographic nightmare because automation will make it much harder to get on the escalator of economic growth. Again, he's wrong about that because those countries are paying people. It's a lot cheaper for them to actually pay employees because the technology is more expensive, because the cost of living is so much lower. This is like this guy. This guy is a PhD in economics, I'm pretty certain. Oh, man. This stuff drives me nuts. It is easier to give way to excessive premises because we human beings find it much easier to visualize what is disappearing than what is coming next. We know and understand that levels of unemployment are bound to rise globally in the foreseeable future. No, they're not bound to. They're only bound to if you artificially cause it. But over the coming years and decades, we may be surprised. We could witness an unprecedented wave of innovation and creativity driven by new methods and tools of production. There might also be a global expansion of hundreds of thousands of new micro-industries that will hopefully employ hundreds of millions of people. Well, yes, considering the rapid change in technology in the last 250 years, Schwab. Now, we are slowing, we are contracting a little bit with that. But yeah, like this is the Malthusian issue, right? And this is Schwab is an environmentalist, by the way, folks. He's a left-wing environmentalist. It's part of his shtick. It's part of his deal. So to them, they all have this Malthusian thing where they believe that the earth will end, it's going to be destroyed, and there's too many people on earth, and it's our fault because they never see that technology actually is increasing our luxury and our living standards. And they definitely don't see it with laissez-faire markets, with free market capitalism. They think they have to control it. Everything he's talking like this is free markets, and it's in no way, shape, or form or a natural, organic causation. And it's not. It's not at all. This is all 1,000% engineered. Look at the places that never shut down. Look at South Dakota and Kristi Noem. Look at Florida. Florida shut down but opened up way back, what was it, August? Let's see here. Let's go back here. One sentence. It says, of course, we cannot know what the future holds, except that much will depend on the trajectory of future economic growth. Well, it always does, but it's not a pie, Klaus. You know this. It is a... wealth is an issue of creating technology and spreading resources and creating and services and things that people want. It's not a pie that there are only so many pieces of. It can grow and expand. It expands with us as human beings. Yeah, there are finite sources in the world, but guys, you don't have to take my word for it, but you're absolutely insane if you think that those resources are anywhere close to being destroyed, because they're just not. The earth is very resource rich, and we are coming to a plateau in human population. It will be happening soon, at least according to Hans Rosling. And the data suggests this. As we get richer, we start having less children. And this, again, goes against that replacement rate issue. But $100, Schwab talks about replacement rates, and needing to bring in migrants and whatever else. And then at the same time, we'll say, well, there's a crisis in automation. This crisis in automation, and low-wage workers and unskilled workers can't get into these jobs. Guarantee you. So he talks out of both sides of his mouth, folks. He says one thing and then another that completely contradict each other. And what else would you expect? In any case, guys, that's all I have. Went a little long, but not too bad. And I will catch you guys tomorrow and next Monday with this. And on Thursday, I will be reading from Father Sephiroth Rose's excerpt on nihilism. So I hope you all have been enjoying that as much as I have. Guys, this has been On Minus One Story Time with your favorite host, Bill. And guys, wish you all well.